We'll wait a couple more minutes. I guess it's just pretty close to the hour, depending on how your clock works, so wait a couple minutes. Hi, Amber.
Hi, everyone.
We're just waiting a couple more minutes, Amber. We'll start.
Not a problem, thanks.
Yeah. Hey, Shelley.
Hi, Nancy.
How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
Pretty good. I'll give it one more minute.
Shelley? Oh,
Hello, everybody
sorry.
else.
Hey, Shelley, this is Sophie.
Hi, Sophie.
Hey, are you available after this call for a quick chat? I have like 1.5 question for you. Yeah.
I will tell you in a moment.
Okay, great.
Today was a big meeting day. Yes, I do. I do have.
Awesome.
Yes.
Will I be able to call your cell phone, or what's the best way to reach you
Cell is
after this
good.
meeting?
Do you need me to give it to you?
I think I have it,
I'll
but yeah,
type it in the chat.
awesome. Thank you so much.
Okay, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. I see Erin's on too. Hello, Erin.
Nancy.
I'm assuming that I think Raleigh was not going to be able to make the call. I'm not sure about John and Eric and Leslie, who were the organizing team for the enabling fair, but hopefully they'll join us. And Rowena Smith was going to come. I'm sorry, Rowena Davis was going to come on as well. But I will go ahead and get started. So, can everyone see the agenda that I've got on the screen?
We can see.
Okay, sounds good. So anybody have anything they want to add to the discussion today? It's kind of full, but we may need to jump off into other meetings, but other calls for some of these topics. But anybody have anything to add? Nope. Sophie's added, I think Sophie added. Yes, thank you, Sophie. The link to the meeting notes, if you're interested, that should be the same document with the notes added to it. So, okay, the first thing on the agenda is the debrief on the crowdsourcing event. I've got the link to the recording of the event if you're interested. That's there. It's almost finished processing. It should be available for editing if you want to. And for I know Plato was not able to make it in. Just to give him the background, what we were doing with this second event, Plato, we were interested in, we had the first event in February, we identified educational resources that would be, that could be targeted to researchers or others actually, publishers, data supporters and so on, about research data management, but also especially about enabling the FAIR data principles. So we identified maybe, I can't remember exactly how many, I can flip to the spreadsheet here in a second. We got a number of resources identified, and then the second event was to map those to the FAIR principles. So just to show you, as long as we've got it here, this is the spreadsheet of resources that were gathered all together. This spreadsheet, so you can see the titles and home pages are there, notes about them, and then the initials, and then the form we used was this one, and here are the results that we got from which I can show in a spreadsheet form in a second as well. So in terms of the discussion today, I don't know how much, we had a little bit of debriefing by the team who are organizing right immediately afterward that people can either repeat what they were thinking, or I see John is on now. Great, John Fetters is on as well, as co-chair of this group. So we can talk a little bit about what our perceptions were of the actual exercise, really, of mapping the resources to the FAIR principles. But part of what we need to do as well is to talk some about how we want to do the gap analysis, how we want to write the final report for that subgroup of the Enabling FAIR project, because there's I guess we don't really have a deadline so much at this point, Shelley, in terms of April, but we do have work we want to use the work of the other groups as part of our work as well, and hopefully we can talk about that in a little bit with Shelley on as well. So I don't know if we want to just start, we have a couple of other items to talk about. So maybe just give this discussion about half an hour or so, or 35 minutes, something like that, and then we can figure out how to move to some of the other topics. Does that sound like a reasonable approach, people?
Yes.
Okay, that's good. I see Bob's on too. Great. Hi, Bob. Bob Downs. Great.
Hi,
Okay.
Nancy.
Hey,
Sorry I'm
Bob.
late.
That's okay. You didn't miss much. We just got started, really. So you can see the agenda too, Bob?
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Okay.
It looks
Okay.
good.
Okay, sounds good. Okay. I don't know. Did people have any, those who were there present, did you have any observations about the event itself that we should talk a little bit about, especially in terms of the actual exercise of mapping the resources we found to the FAIR principles? And I'm happy to flip over to any of those results too if people want to look at things a little bit more closely. You should all have the link to we can give you the link to the mapping resources that have the responses on it. Let me just put that into chat here for a second in case people want to look at that themselves. So that's in chat, and you can look and see what's happening, what people said there. But did people have any comments or want to make any observations?
Nancy, this is
Um,
Karen.
oh,
I thought that overall, I thought it went really well. I think, in terms of trying to do the exercise myself, and it seemed like this was echoed with other people, that when you didn't create the resource, it was harder to do the mapping to the FAIR principles. But that said, I still think it's a really worthwhile effort, and it might be interesting to have both the creator and a user mapping just to see, this is what the user's perception is.
Yeah, that's true.
and Nancy,
Yeah.
John is on the call, so I hope he's okay. I'm summarizing his feedback as well. So after the event, a few of the organizers kind of chimed in and talked about how we felt about the process. And I think this is really a summary of my thoughts and Rowley's thoughts and Rowena as well as John. I think we all thought that since people have different understanding of the principles, as well as what Erin said about familiarity with the resources that they're mapping. Some people said, oh yeah, I'm mapping my own, so it was really easy. But other people were mapping definitely resources that they didn't create themselves. And so we had different ways or different interpretations of what areas of the resources would meet the principles and what areas might not. And so I think we all thought a more structured guidance. Should we do it another time? It would be good to give a more not detailed matrix, because then again that would take a lot of time, but then just a more structured guidance so that the assessment will be more consistent. And then we went on to talk about crowdsourcing is great, but should we still review the mapping by another group of individuals, or should we do it vice versa? Like I think we end up talking about, should it be a top down versus meaning like a group of people that should map the initial concepts first and then allowing the crowd to agree or disagree, or should we go with the bottom up, meaning have the crowdsource events first, but then having another group to review the mapping. But either way, it sounds like we might need a review body or some kind of editorial body, but we're not sure if we're there yet. So those are the thoughts that we talked about via email after the events.
That's good. Thank you. Thank you for summarizing. One other thing I would add too that I didn't actually comment on, but except kind of during this session itself, is that I think it was difficult to map a lot of the resources to the specific to the sub principles underneath. I mean, it was easier to map them at the FAIR level, but not so much the specific details below that. So, and it was interesting. We had Keith Russell from Australian National Data Service on the call too. Thankfully, he was in a campground because it was their holiday, their Good Friday holiday. But he stayed on and was able to talk a little bit about the fact that they're going through a similar exercise at ANS, and he's going to send the resources to us that they've done it, they've found and they've mapped, hopefully using the same kind of spreadsheet approach so that we can add them to what we've got, which would be great. But also he said that one of the things they did was to just map at that top level, and then they associated almost more of a keyword approach to the resources as instead of direct mapping, so that people could see that for instance, persistent identifier related to one of the things that was under the map to FAIR, so that it was more specific that way, but rather than doing that specific mapping. So that was kind of interesting too. We did not talk about process, who actually did that in the when Keith was talking about it during the call, but the whole idea of review is kind of implicit in there, and certainly given what we were trying to do, it makes a lot of sense to think about doing it too. So and we do have a process of doing that before they go into the clearinghouse, but and to which we would definitely like more people to be part of that process. And we can talk about that later if need be. But anyway, that's the comments. Anybody else have thoughts or comments about any of that?
I'll just quickly say that I thought Sophie's summary of everything else we thought of was very good on everything to add there, and I agree with what you said as well.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, so maybe we could talk about what we do as that. I mean, in some ways, it seems like that whole question of review is part of the gap analysis process as well, which we've not really talked about. So we can maybe move on to that. Anybody have? I mean, the mapping, the results. I was just there. So go back to that again. The results. If you look at the summary on this that you get from Google Maps, not in the spreadsheet form, but in this kind of graph form, it's kind of interesting to see as we go down, how these things graph to yes or no, part of the the different sub-principles. So it really, I mean, we'll have to look at this more closely and see what these actually mean and factor in these comments, but it's very interesting. I think what people found corroborates what Sophie and John were saying as well. So anyway, feel free to look at that if you want to. And actually, I was thinking that if people have comments after looking at this and want to just add them either to the meeting notes of this call or just send them to the DM training listserv, that would be some really interesting feedback that we could include in the gap analysis discussion and then in the report as well. So, jot down your thoughts and please send them to us. And if you're interested in being part of that analysis too, we'd definitely welcome people to join that. Just say that right off the bat too. So,
yeah. And Nancy, do you mind just quickly shifting back to the responses there? And I'm just curious whether or not there was some coverage so we saw F and A, there was coverage. People felt like there was some coverage from the resources that were looked at. What about INR? I'm just curious.
Yes. Yeah, there was.
There's still a lot of coverage through I, and then
Right,
through
and
R.
let's see, on screen. Yeah, so yeah, R was a little bit more evenly distributed between yes and no, it seemed like. So, just at a kind of a cursory view, it seems like that would be the area that needs more educational resources.
Well, what's interesting here is probably what we say the simplest gap analysis we can do the 30 or 35 resources, 31 resources we looked at, cover the FAIR principles in some form or fashion? And the answer is yes. I mean, at the very highest, most vaguest level, the FAIR principles are being covered by these 31 responses. Now, how well is a different question, but that's a good, interesting thing just in of itself. The highest level, there's some level of coverage. So
yeah.
John, Nancy, this is Danny. This
Hi,
is
Danny.
great. I'm glad I'm finally getting on a call with you guys because I actually missed the sourcing itself, right, and the activity of doing this. But I just wanted to comment as you're going through this and echo what John said and actually what Nancy said prior, that at the highest level, it's really easy to say a yes or no. And this is my reflections coming from the repository guidance tag within FAIR and what we're trying to do to see the current state of the repositories and how they consider themselves compliant with the principles. And it's really easy to say at the highest level, a repository can say they're implementing or they adhere to the principle, the actual principle itself. But it's always the devil in the details when you start digging into the hows, like are you really applying this fourth principle under I, or to that degree? And you'll see that everybody has this difference of opinion when it comes to the more granular criteria. And so it's not surprising that this happens too with the data management materials. It's just, I think it's just the nature of the beast, right? At the principle level, it's really easy to say yes, and then once you start digging into it, it's not quite so easy.
Yeah, that makes sense. And also, there's been interesting discussions related to the fact that depending upon who, I guess this is part of a conversation that Matt and Raleigh were having offline on a different topic that is related to this, in terms of the types of resources that are being created and whether researchers themselves would be interested necessarily in knowing about those specific levels, like the necessity for persistent identifier, the necessity for rich metadata, quote unquote, whatever that means. Do the researchers really need to know that, or is it really only the data supporters who need to know that and would offer it? And is it enough that researchers know that there are FAIR data principles and what the purpose of them are, and then leave it to others who support them and who do that processing of data maybe to know more specifics about how to actually do that.
Yeah.
So that's it.
I think that there's going to be some there again, it's going to be some gradation where, to the degree that you can educate them about that principle as it facilitates the repository doing its work, then there's value to that, right?
Yeah, I mean, and I guess, a question for Shelley in terms of doing a gap analysis and making recommendations for educational resources. I mean, that is one of the things that, the Enabling FAIR folks have talked about wanting to get out of this project, really. And, I think that recommendations about what should be created, it needs to be kind of nuanced, given what we found too. So I don't know if that's, any, you want to comment on that, Shelley, or have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, actually, there's been a couple meetings that I had today having to do with, here we are in the work that you're doing, Nancy and John and Raleigh and Sophie and this whole crew, is how do we support the researcher when it comes to a new policy specific to fair interoperability between repositories, between journals and repositories, and then the data itself. So there's some layering there. What I believe is that the materials that were being looked at are primarily at the science research level, and that will be incredibly valuable. Not only in a general way, but also in a domain-specific way. And then how do we lead a researcher to that? I think that's one angle. And another one is the pieces of the puzzle having to do with data, the citation, and in your publication. Pretty sure from conversations that Nancy and I have had that is a gap on author and researcher guidance. So that's all kind of in the weeds. How do we think about this? How do we map this? How do we address it? And then what's the best way? If this can all lead towards some sort of an understanding of the best way that we can help a researcher, do we put this in? Who should we put this in the hands of? Like should we do like a train the trainer thing and show people that these resources exist? This is how they map, and librarians, for instance, should we let them know about it? So that whole larger thinking would be valuable.
Yeah, I think so. I agree with you. I guess that's part of the question, that the kinds of questions that should go into the report then too. Sounds like, right? Or is that the kind of thing that we should discuss in terms of implementation? What's next?
Yeah, implementation. What's next? I think you guys have done an amazing job identifying materials, identifying sources, categorizing them. This is such a fantastic success story, and we need to recognize the incredible effort to get this far, and then realize, okay, then how do we leverage it in the best way for the folks that need it the most, and make that leap from one set of stakeholders into this much larger group of stakeholders. And what does that mean exactly?
Right. Yeah, go ahead. Sophie, was that you going to say something?
Oh yeah, sorry, I didn't realize you could hear. I just unclicked.
Oh, okay.
I didn't mean to interrupt you. I wanted to kind of add on to what Shelley said, because we had at one point, Nancy, if you recall, maybe just 2 conversations ago, like the planning conversations that we had about this event, we did talk about kind of splicing out different personas that might influence how this mapping might, how the mapping results would be shaped. And so I think hearing what other people said, especially Danny and John as well, it sounds like it would help to have the first degree analysis just based on these 31 results, and then taking and then from the perspective of, okay, now how would this help the researchers, or how would this help the librarians or the trainers? And so basically, not just a gap analysis of the results, but also gap analysis of what does that mean to the users or the different personas that like Shelley said, that might benefit from this finding. So I think I just want to say that it sounds like it, regardless of the timing, like you said earlier, Nancy, that it would be still a good exercise to do the gap analysis.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. And in terms of what we can do with some of the resources too, I don't know, Matt, if you want to comment on this, since you weren't on the call, but you know about this group. The EarthCube Science Committee is working on a vision statement, I guess you could say, for what that committee wants to do, and one of them, that's one of the 3, is on engagement with scientists, and a subpart under that is promoting fair data principles. They're going to be having domain data workshops planning during the next year, presumably, where different topics will be discussed, and presented to scientists, and one of them is the FAIR principle. So they're not specifically interested in knowing. It sounds like they're not interested in knowing necessarily what educational resources are available, and but maybe how to address that question of at what level do researchers need and want to know about FAIR principles might come up. So, Matt, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about that, or just mention
Yeah, I can't say a whole lot. So I missed the call last week, the science committee call, but there's a workshop, small meeting next week, I guess, that's here in Boulder that I'll be attending. That's kind of a, I don't know if planning meeting is the right word, but a group from the EarthCube science community a small group is getting together to try to provide some input to NSF onto kind of what these workshops, what kinds of outcomes and outputs these workshops should potentially have. So I think this is, the aspect that you're talking about, Nancy, is should there be a recommendation that certain resources or topics like the FAIR principles are featured in these workshops and potentially reported on in the outcomes. So I'll know more. I'll be able to say more about that after that meeting, which is next week. But I think that's the idea, is that because the NSF has some funds to do some workshops around community engagement, I think the idea is, well, can they be coordinated in some way, at least at kind of the level of recommending what the workshops should produce as outcomes that would help these workshops be more of a sort of consistent and coordinated set of events, not just, you guys go talk to yourselves and you guys go talk to yourselves and you people go talk to yourselves.
Right.
There's lots of workshops, no shortage of workshops. So if these can maybe be thought of in a larger sense, I think is kind of the idea. So.
Yeah. They talked about it as a planning meeting for the data, the state workshop. So.
Yeah. The meeting next week is definitely a planning meeting.
Yeah. And in the discussion of the EarthCube Science Committee, there was some recognition of this project, this Enabling FAIR project that they'd heard about. So, there's a little bit of knowledge there, but there's definitely an opportunity to put the work that the group does, the whole group does, including the taxi, in front of that group too. So that's a thought to take forward. So, any other comments or thoughts? Okay. Well, that will be fun to think about and write about, I'm sure. So let's see. So again, I guess I won't ask for volunteers for doing the gap analysis and writing a final report. I mean, hopefully the team has been working on it will continue, but if anybody else who's on the call wants to join, feel free to let me know or let the whole group know. So that would be great. All right. Anything else on that? Otherwise, we'll move on to other topics. Is Rowena on yet? Okay. I think I will go. I'll just mention this. I don't know if people saw this, and if Rowena comes on, she can talk a little bit more about what the plan is here. But the Belmont Forum, I think people probably know what the Belmont Forum is that it has an e-infrastructure and data management working group that has come up with a data skills curricula framework that has been a collaborative development by a number of educators around the world. Really, it's associated. There were RDA events a couple of sessions ago. I guess in Monterey there was a meeting. Some of the folks here on this call contributed thoughts and comments to the documents that were the basis of the framework, and now they're in the it's been endorsed, or I'm not sure what the term is, sanctioned, I guess, by the Belmont Forum, and presented to other education groups and other groups at RDA, and they're interested in the next phase is implementation. So this Rowena Davis, who's the project coordinator for this project, if not others, at Belmont Forum, talked to me about the possibility of collaborating on an event similar to what the crowdsourcing events were, or in more of a webinar environment, to have Vicki Lucas, who is one of the main writers, at least authors of the framework, and very involved in it, come and do a presentation, and then provide the opportunity for both Q&A, but also discussions about how best to implement that. So that event is scheduled for Thursday, April 19th at 9:30 Pacific time. You can see the whole list of times there on the meeting notes, but that's something that might well be of interest for people to attend. And feel free to send on that notice about it, the save the date notice that went out yesterday to other groups as well. It'd be nice to have people on it who are doing that teaching of data skills anyway. Come on, and thank you for including the link there, so we can to come and join the conversations. So this first one may just well be kind of an introduction, and we'll kind of identify topics, and then we might have other groups, other events, or other opportunities for discussion in group as well with the other topics that come on. But that's the plan there. So, any questions about that? Comments?
This is Matt. I'm just curious. Has anybody on this call been involved with that? I know Nancy and Sophie, you attended a meeting last year, but is anybody involved in the writing of these?
Well, I think, Shelley was quite involved, because Shelley sent in quite a few comments too, right?
Yep. I wasn't involved in the writing, but I did. I was with Sophie and Nancy on the initial feedback that we provided, which was incredibly robust. That was really, really great.
Yeah. Wade. What's Wade's last name? Smith. Wade. I have this
Bishop
Smith today. Bishop, thank you. Because Plato's on, because I have a Smith there, I can see it. Wade Bishop and Matt, you made add comments too, I think, didn't you? There were a number of people who did. So
I probably did, yeah.
Yeah. So
what Bob Samores has done, and other folks at Belmont, if they've taken, I'm actually looking at it. I carry it with me because it's so valuable to talk about as an entity, and he's been going from institution to institution to see if he can find folks that would adopt it within either existing or new curriculum. I don't think the intention, Rowena might be able to help us here, but I don't think the intention is for Belmont to build the curriculum.
No, I don't think so either. Yeah, no, it's definitely something. I think it seems to me it's kind of like an RDA product or outcome, a recommendation that's something people would adopt. One of the things we've talked about, Rowena and I talked about briefly, is whether that skills curricula could be part of, one of the frameworks that are in the Data Management Training Clearinghouse. So we've talked about, on this call coming in, encouraging people to submit their resources to the Clearinghouse, and then, they could all be organized under that, the data skills curricula framework. So that's part of what we would talk about. We could talk about it on the call as well, or in other groups. So all of this does certainly beg for, editorial groups, an editorial group associated with the Clearinghouse, but that's another topic. Let's see how that works in the future. So yeah. Great, thanks. Anything else? Anybody has? Okay, well, we've got a number. We're coming on to conference season, or abstract season for proposals and conferences. The first one that's up is the AGU session proposals, and let's see. I've got a spreadsheet that. Yes, this is the one that Leslie Wyborn from and created for people who have been part of the Enabling Fair project, but in DMTC as the Data Management Training Working Group as it relates to that. But these are the kinds of sessions that we could submit abstracts for, and so I wanted to talk about that briefly. Raleigh has made a proposal which makes sense to put in, well, I guess there are a number of opportunities, as you can see, union and not union sessions so much, probably what would be most applicable for this group and what we're working on would either be oral sessions or, and again, I'm not completely familiar with all these formats, so Shelley, help me out here if need be. Oral sessions, tutorials are a possibility, then posters and e-lightning talks and that sort of thing. So Raleigh had talked with John and myself about possibly doing, I think it was he considered it basically an oral session, and it could be applied to either the Earth and Space Science Informatics group, Public Affairs, or Education, or an opportunity to be part of a bigger session if there's a union session on enabling fair in general, which I'm sure Shelley can talk to us about, and or a tutorial, which is a 30-minute opportunity to talk about, to do some, as you can see here, short expert review and synthesis of results from a number of researchers. So that makes a lot of sense to do something there. But I just wanted to throw that discussion open to see what people thought might work, given what we've got going with this group.
I just put the link that you're looking at, Nancy, into the notes so folks can navigate it.
Okay, sorry, I should have.
Yep. And so Leslie Wyborn has a skill set that is absolutely incredible. She is able to visualize incredible complexities within our informatics community such that we take advantage of the how the program is developed for SE and how that then connects into other domain-specific programs. It is a skill that is very unique to her, and she's able to do this. So this spreadsheet is kind of like a guide for us to sort of see into that depth. So there's some things that happen within AGU that if you behave in a certain way at the very beginning, at the time of session submission, you have a better shot at oral presentations, visibility of the work that you're doing. So the more sessions that get submitted for the kinds of topics that we're all interested in, now granted, there's some dance there, right? So if you submit a session, you can't submit for an oral abstract. So you need to kind of work as a team in order to get your material as visible as you want. But there's definitely ways to do that, and we're using this spreadsheet for the project to try to make that happen. Now, that if you put it here, that doesn't mean someone's going to do the work for you. It just means you now have awareness across a larger group to work together. And I believe Leslie continues to help with the program committee for AGU this year, along with Jane, I'm not remembering.
Hunter? Where's she from?
The UK.
Jane, it's not Jane Hunter, is it? From
I don't think
Melbourne, anyway.
Anyway, Jane helped last year, and Mark Parsons was on last year, but it was Jane and Leslie who teamed up, and I think Leslie's going to continue to support them because she's so incredibly valuable, and she's valuable to the larger program committee as well. So the more ideas that get up here, like if you want to put your idea up here and like make a note, please somebody else take this, or you're welcome to do that. You can morph it. The union sessions are broad-based, right? So when you the way a union session would get, first of all, just by submitting a union session doesn't mean anyone's going to take it. You have to actually do a lot of advocating for your union session. You have to talk to the program chair. You should talk to Denny. He's the one that makes the decision on union sessions, and just like you're trying to get funding, you would want to contact him and have conversations with him. And this is where Leslie Wyborn can help us to move a union session forward. I have to be very cautious because I'm an AGU employee. I can't advocate for a union session that I submit, which is what happened last year. I submitted it, but Leslie advocated it. Please also know that Leslie wrote it. So I submitted it, but it was her writing.
Yeah.
So there are these things that happen behind the scenes in order to get visibility out there. And I think this spreadsheet just shows you the coordination effort that's necessary. Public affairs and education don't ding you. Like, for instance, you can put sessions in here, but when it comes to abstracts, these are extra areas where you can submit and you're not dinged on the abstract, how many abstracts an author can submit, a first author. So they're incredibly useful in order to get messaging across. And if you can figure out how to position a session that does impact public affairs, but also highlights the challenges or whatever you want to bring out within the work that you're doing. Like, for instance, I see this group could easily put a session in for education. And that would be an opportunity for the folks that are working on materials to actually get visibility and put abstracts against.
Yeah.
Shelley, this is Danny. Can I ask you a quick question? Did you and Leslie, as you were drafting this, I sent something off to Leslie in response to Raleigh's questions about whether there was any particular strategy for the tags. I don't want to usurp, the this particular effort's time on this topic, but in the broader context of all the tags under FAIR, was there any strategy that all the tags would get together and have some overarching umbrella session, like an oral, where we could guarantee a lot of contributions? Or did you guys envision maybe a particular tag operating in a broader context, and then their topic would be one you guys see under the SE sessions, one on repositories, and so that tag A would fit under there, but would the idea be that we would pitch it for cast a wider net, and then we'd do one topic in a broader, you know what I'm trying to say?
I do.
I'm sorry.
So there is a moment in time where, the concept of lumping takes place, where sessions are smooshed together. I would not necessarily target broad with this effort. I would kind of think specifically, and then have and try to get teams of folks putting out multiple sessions.
Okay.
So that you can get all the slivers out there with the idea in mind. This is how Leslie thinks, and this is how it works, that when it comes to lumping, you have already designed the combination to come together into a larger session where you can probably get 2 orals and at least a poster out of it.
Okay, so you kind of already know who you want to lump with, is what you're saying. You kind of have a notion of what would fit together with you.
Sort of like shopping a proposal to different funding sources, kind of that sort of thing you've got.
Yeah. So my only other comment, and I'm sorry I have to jump off the line now, but my only other comment is the question about if there's something like the education piece where you really want to draw in some science while you're at AGU, like how. So this is where, obviously, from the repository side, I feel like we fall down on getting the science relevant, the science relevant message to be heard by science, like really attracting them to those sessions in SE.
It is hard. It's very hard.
So maybe that's a little back of your mind kind of focus for all of us as well. Like what would be
for tag?
Yeah, go ahead.
For tag A in specific, Leslie is thinking big thoughts for you. She remembers do you remember the standing room only sessions last fall meeting for the repositories? She wants to try to make that happen again.
Well, kudos to her. That sounds great. All right, so that's fine. I will network with her.
Yes, I think she could help guide you on what those words would look like and the positioning. I think she already has in mind what it is.
Before you go, Danny, one other thing I was thinking about that might work well with repository and education is, one of the things we have been able to identify to some extent with what we've done in the different crowdsourcing events, and also what we've been adding to the Clearinghouse, are domain-specific resources related to both data management and FAIR principles. So it seems to me it might make sense if we can to for instance, to work with you in your repository and the domains you work with to kind of, as one kind of case study or use example, use case of particular domain that has resources, and this is how you do, this education for your scientists. So it brings the scientists in, but it also establishes a connection between repositories and the teaching and learning that goes on in repositories as well. So bringing together a team in that way. That if a marine ocean area data is one that we want to do, and there's a lot in the Clearinghouse already about ocean data and research data management.
So,
I
Nancy,
think you've done others as well. It seems like we might pull something together there.
I love that, and I'm happy to talk to you offline about that. That sounds
Okay. Okay, we'll talk. All right.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks so much.
Also, sorry, Danny, before you go, this is Amber from Data One. I just wanted to add to this conversation that we're currently working up a session proposal that's focused on provenance and interoperability and reusability from a provenance standpoint. So I don't know how this fits in, but maybe we should kind of share notes, abstracts as well.
Sounds good. All right. Well, thank you so much, you guys. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks for joining. All right.
Bye.
That's great. Amber, in terms of what you're proposing, are you doing it in the context of FAIR principles as well, or just more generally provenance and reusability?
We will be doing it in the context of FAIR principles in terms of the interoperability and reusability, but it's primarily focused on tools that exist supporting provenance, so it's more of a technical viewpoint.
Okay.
This ESIP recently had a workshop focused on that Matt has been involved in, and there's also the Hotel community in the Arctic Data Center. So it's across a number of different groups that are all interested in this. So I think it's going to be big enough to get or multiple sessions.
Okay, great. So that I wonder, that's the sort of thing like, well, I don't know if this spreadsheet would work for that as well, but it would be useful to know, what you're doing there too, just to see how things could coordinate together. So good. Okay, great. Thank you. Anybody have any other comments or thoughts or suggestions about how we could approach this? The deadline for applications is 13 days away. So we need to think about it soon.
So Nancy, this is probably a very specific, but I know Shelley has asked us to consider putting together a tutorial based on our experience. I've also seen, I'm pretty sure everybody who's subscribing to the SC listserv, well, I hope people have seen it. Anyway, Ruth was saying maybe we could put together a data management tutorial, and I feel like this is, like Shelley said, right up our alley, that we could be able to put together some kind of tutorial, framing around maybe not just the clearinghouse itself, but also how the clearinghouse, the content, and what we've been doing so far could really help with the effort to write a data management plan, as well as to meet data management requirements and things like that. So that's one thought. I know, looking through these tabs, I don't think it's been claimed yet. So maybe that's something that we could consider for our group.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, I've had some thoughts, but I wanted to have this conversation first on the call. But yeah, I think it makes perfect sense to do a tutorial. Maybe offer more than one different approach. Because again, that subject area, that domain perspective might also be another approach to offering tutorials as well. So
yeah, and I know that before Danny won't be able to hear this now, but I think she is quite right in terms of saying we really need to reach out to the researchers a bit more. We shouldn't just be teaching each other more about data management planning, which is still great because there are still people who want to learn more about it. But we do need to draw in more people. So I know that people are really worrying about meeting publisher requirements or funder requirements. So maybe our tutorial could feature what resources we have tied into potential, some of the popular, quote unquote, popular funders, and then showing people how these resources could help people. So we're drawing researchers in by addressing their pain points, but then featuring our resources and our in the clearinghouse at the same time.
That sounds almost like a series. We're almost talking about a series of
yeah, well, because
routes.
but since you're talking about a couple, I'm just thinking like this could be one of the topic, but then we just pick a few use cases. We don't have to obviously cover all the popular
Right.
funders. There will be quite a bit, but then we can certainly choose some of the quote unquote bigger ones, and then just say, oh yeah, this is just an example of how when you have a reliable pool of resources, this is how you can get to it. But obviously, you know, depending on what resources we pick, we can also highlight the fact that, oh, look, these are created by your trusted data professionals, like maybe your librarians or your data centers or whatever. So just basically using this opportunity to teach the researchers how to meet a requirement, but leveraging the resources that might be near them, but they're not necessarily aware of right away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. Okay.
Cool.
Yeah. So, well, let's see. I guess what we can do with that is maybe if people have ideas, jot them down on the spreadsheet, and then maybe drop me a line too if you want to talk, or I mean, I'll be looking at this too and making proposals and also contacting people. But you know, the next week or so, we really need to work on this. So that'd be great. Good ideas here. So. Shelley, I wanted to ask you too, do you know whether there'll be a data help desk again at AGU? I mean,
is Erin on? Erin
she dropped. She had to drop. Yeah.
I think so.
Okay.
The plan, I know lessons learned coming from last year is we'd like it to be with where the repositories actually have their support teams, not
Right.
this one booth with one person, but more of a community. So I don't think it'll be in the same location. I think the idea is it'll be in the exhibit hall, and we'll see if we can get like create a town or some sort of a neighborhood.
Yeah.
Now that's the hope. I don't know, fingers crossed that we can actually make that happen.
Yeah. That I know that's the plan for the ESA, the environmental
yes.
data.
I'm delighted it's going to be at ESA. That is so. I'll be there. I'll be at ESA right after I finish talking to Sophie.
Yeah. Okay. Sounds good. Yeah. So that should be a good opportunity to test these things out too. I was just asking because it would impact how much who can do some of these things and how much effort would go into it. So
true. You should have other venues for training, teaching opportunities. But since it's a new format, this tutorial thing is brand new this year. It would be, we should test it out and make sure it'll work for us. I think I'm going to submit for author reviewer best practices for data. And frankly, we'd like to have a co-author on that. So.
Okay. Sounds good. All right. Cool. All right. Any other thoughts or comments about any of this? Good opportunities here. Okay. The other thing to think about then, and we're running, got about 5 minutes left, so just recognize that there's also a deadline for ESIP summer session at April 30th. We need to think about how we want to do this, and I think obviously whatever we come up with AGU could to some extent be reused for ESIP summer, but I think we should think about how we want to target, what topics we want to target there as well. So definitely appreciate ideas there. That will probably have to be done online since we won't have a call again before the sessions are due, but definitely would appreciate suggestions there. That also will be after we hear about the IMLS grant, which happens sometime this month. And if that does happen, or even not, actually, we probably will plan to have an advisory board meeting. One of the targets we've got for the Clearinghouse is to establish an advisory board to some extent or other, and possibly an editorial board. So we'll probably try to set up a call or a meeting around ESIP summer that would be both face-to-face and remote. So that's something to keep in mind as well. But any thoughts or comments about that right now? And Amber, your Data 1 process is still, your program committee comes up with suggestions, and then you see what you solicit based on what you want to do and what the room there, what the possibilities are, is that right?
We're actually doing it a little bit differently this year. One of the things, because we've typically had a 2-day meeting, and the second day has overlapped with the workshop activity of ESIP's first day. What we are doing this year is we're doing a 1-day meeting, and we are doing workshops as part of ESIP. So where we've had kind of more lengthy workshop activities as part of the DUG, we're now putting them as part of the ESIP calendar on the Tuesday. So that means that we have less flexibility in terms of the 1-day meeting. So yes, there are still conversations with the community about building that agenda, but it doesn't have as much space because we just have the 1 day as we've had previously. But we are still having community presentations, and so we still have the option for submission of abstracts for oral presentations and posters. And so that we manage, because it's such a small meeting, we manage those up until kind of June time, so there's no rush on any abstracts for that.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, it's just certainly an opportunity to, you've got different people who come to the Data Users Group, then come to ESIP, so it'd be nice to target some of the member nodes that come to your group as well, to do both teaching and our repositories and so on. So
right. Yep, and we're hoping though that by integrating our content more into the ESIP meeting, that we will have more of those repositories stay and participate in ESIP.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, because there's so much opportunity for problem solving with the more there who have experience and are dealing with the similar kinds of issues. So that's great. Okay, let's see. Well, there's only one other thing that is on the agenda in terms of a report, and I'll just be very brief about my part of it, and then Sophie, if you have anything to add, or anyone else who's there. I did attend the Education Interest Group at RDA, which is an overarching group that has sort of discusses all kinds of issues related to education. It seems like their focus is mostly for data supporters rather than researchers per se. So there are a number of different educational resources that have been created and were presented on different platforms that I think we can glean educational resources from in order to put them into the Clearinghouse as well, if not work together with them. One of the things that came in that will show up, such as Edison is one, the CESTA, these are all acronyms, and I can put that kind of thing in the notes in the interest of time. But one of the things that came out that I think is interesting is, I did a 2-minute presentation on the Clearinghouse and talked about the Enabling Fair project as well. And one of the things that came up was, the comment was, it'd be useful to have the educational resources that are created be fair, enabling as well, which was interesting. And one of the things that came out of it is impetus to establish persistent identifiers for the resources that we put in the Clearinghouse. And we've talked about ways of doing that if people don't already, but that's something that might be something we want to talk about more, and within the RDA community, but also among ourselves as well. So that's a topic of future discussion. And the other thing is that in terms of the agriculture interest group, that's a domain that's just doing so much work on creating fair educational resources to enable fair data that there's a lot of opportunity there for both putting these in the Clearinghouse, but also working together with them. Shelley, in that area as well. They've just done a lot of work, and they've got a network that's part of that interest group that's creating wonderful resources for agriculture and climate. So that's something I'm going to pursue as well. But that might be a way to, for instance, in some of these educational events, some of these conference events, to feature that as a domain, for instance. So anyway, that's another thought. Sophie, did you have anything you wanted to? Oh, one more thing. Sorry, before I let you have it, the floor for for 30 seconds, since we're over, there's a lot of interest in working with the UK, Helen Glaves in the UK, and Natasha Simons at ANS, Australia, to work together on pulling our efforts in terms of collecting together research data management, and just having maybe an interest group on that that's focused more on researchers too. So that's something we'll check into a little bit more as well. So, Sophie, did you have anything else real quickly?
Yeah, so for 30 seconds, yeah, I would just say that I ended up going to some of the sessions that I don't think I might have normally be able to have the opportunity to go to. And I mainly put my notes in a spreadsheet that was also organized by Leslie, and to coordinate some of the feedback and tying back the experience we have with the FAIR project overall. But the most memorable sessions for me are the ethical and privacy session, the software code session, and the interoperability session. I think all these three topics are areas that are really relevant to the project. But for the time being, obviously, we need to get our basics, our foundation going. And so basically in my notes to the group, I have said that it would be really great to consider the interoperability issue when we're going into our testing phase, and thinking we should think about any potential ethical and privacy issue. Even though we're in the earth science space, a lot of times people think we don't have any issues, but when it comes, it's people are often unfamiliar or unprepared, and so we don't want people to get caught off guard. And then software is definitely a very special type of research output that we need to help people in dealing with and making the software tools fair. So the interest group is looking at the type of metadata elements that should be used, and what kind of licensing or rights challenges there might be. And they're also looking at obviously how to cite the software or where to store them and everything. So yeah, so that interest group was really useful for me. That's
and
it.
we'll going to continue to be part of it, so we can act as liaison. That?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, good. Sorry, that was we're over a little bit. Anybody have anything else to report or questions before we sign off? No? Okay, well, thank you very much for attending, and any thoughts or comments, please add them to the notes or send via email, and we will be in touch, certainly next month as well. All right?
Thanks, Nancy.
All right.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Sophie, do you want to add those notes, Sophie? Do you want to
Yeah.
add notes to the link to your notes in that you gave to Leslie into our meeting notes as well?
Yeah, sure.
That'd be great.
Great. I will do that after I talk to Shelly real quick.
Okay.
I'll just call her now since we're recording. I won't ask my questions here.
Okay, sounds good. All right.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right. Talk to you
Thanks.
later.
Okay.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye.
Thanks, Shelley. Bye-bye.